Welcome everyone, my name is Tim Burris and today I want to talk about Blazor Pages and more specifically getting your C# code out of those Razor files. So to demonstrate what I mean, I'm going to set the stage a little bit. So here in this Blazor Server application, which this will actually all be the same regardless of whether it's Blazor Server or if you're using Blaszor WebAssembly. In this particular demo, it happens to be Blazor Server. Here is a sample Blazor page, Razor file called Internet List. And I'll just quickly walk through what it's doing. It's obviously not real, but I'll walk through it and then we'll talk about improving it. So here in my Razor file at the top, we have our route, and of course we have some services we're injecting, a couple of services of our own for getting data and formatting data, a Blazor modal service for showing modal dialogues, and a toast service. We have some incoming parameters like search text and whether or not we want to include deleted. And then we get into some of the logic for preparing the data so that we can display it. So when our page renders, we will go to our entire internet service and we'll download the entire internet. This is a very amazing service. It just hasn't been implemented yet, but and we have an action here that would allow us to delete a website, and we would take one of our website models in. To delete, we would show a modal dialog, and if they didn't cancel it, we would show a toast message. So all that C# code, and then along with this page is all of our HTML. So we have that C#, and then we have the actual page itself, title, header. We're going to loop through all the sites. We're going to further filter down the sites that came back from our service to be only active ones and only ones created in the last 3 years. We are going to then display some data. So we want to show the date it was created, but we're going to show it in a short date string, the URL. We have a conditional where if the site is over 5,000 bytes, then we are going to show the total bytes with a danger, like a red background, and we're using a service to format bytes so that you'll get things like 50 MB for megabytes, or 1 GB if it gets up to gigabyte. And if it's not greater than 5,000 bytes, then we do the same thing, but we use a light background. And then the last few things are we show a div with the net worth. If there is a net worth value, then we are going to format that as currency. And if there is no net worth, if it was null, then we will just show the text unknown. And then finally, we have a button for deleting the website. So when we click that button, we would expect delete website to be called, passing in the item of our loop. Okay, so that's what our page is doing. Of course, this is completely fake. None of this is real. But this is modeled after a couple of Razor pages that I've recently reviewed, Blazor pages. And so the things that are being done here are very similar to what I see out in the wild a lot. So I want to talk about how we can make this Razor page have very little C# code and let it focus on only the HTML. So I'll walk through what we're going to do and then we'll actually do it. We're going to get all these injected services out of here. We're going to get these page parameters. I guess they will actually still be here, but we're going to pass them through. We're going to create an underlying page class where all of this C# code will live, and then we will clean up all these extra things that are used for formatting. We'll clean them up so that what we have is very, very light C# in our HTML. So let's start by creating a copy of this page. Just come over to Solution Explorer. We will Control-C, Control-V. Let's give this a new name. So Internet List New. That's a fantastic name. We'll go ahead and open that guy up. We'll kill this one. We don't need him anymore. So now we have our new copy of our page. And the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is create a backing page or a backing model for this page. So I'm going to come here to Pages. I'm going to do Add New Class. And I'm going to call it Internet List New .razor.cs. Now, I am using Visual Studio Preview, and there is a bug in the latest release. I'm not sure when it's going to be fixed, but whenever I add this file, you're going to see that it's not properly nesting. So up until last week, this was all working, but now with the latest version, the latest preview, this file is not nested. Because it's named the same with just a different extension, this should actually be nested underneath here, so that you would have internet list new, and then you would have this underneath. But we're just going to move on. Nesting, not that huge of a deal. So we're just going to go ahead and call this internet list new page. So this will be our backing page for our actual internet list. So I'm going to control tilde to tell this to go into a side by side. I'm actually going to collapse this for a moment just so that we can have more real estate here for our code window. So we have our page, and we are going to first, let's just go ahead and say we're going to inject this page. Inject. And we'll inject this, our new page, as model. And then what we're going to do is then we're going to move all of this code out and put it into here. So, well, almost all of it. So all of these guys that we're injecting here, we are actually going to remove them. We're going to inject them in to our constructor here. So we'll go ahead and CTOR, use this snippet for creating a new constructor. So we're going to use our column selection for moving these services over. So we'll set our focus right here on line 5, Alt Shift down 4 times, and then we'll Control Shift to the right twice to get that. We'll delete all of that. We'll hold Control Shift to the right all the way to the end of this so that we can get all those services. We will cut them. I'll come over to our constructor here, and we'll just paste these guys in here, and then we are going to come up and replace. Let's just do a quick replace. Let's do all of our underscores with nothing, and let's do our semicolons with commas. Boom. Okay, good. We'll get rid of this last comma because we don't need it. And then we will use quick refactoring control dot to bring up our options, and we will say create all and assign all the remaining as fields. So boom, now we've injected all of our services in. We will actually just format this a little bit, tab those over. Okay, beautiful. So we've moved our services over. Now let's go ahead and let's handle these incoming parameters. So we're going to need these parameters in our page model. So what I like to do here is I like to create a region for my incoming parameters. Parameters, if I can spell it, yes. And we will close our region. And then what we are just going to do is we're just going to come back over. We're going to grab both of these guys, copy, paste them in, kill that parameter. So I'm just using Control X to cut the entire line. And now that we have these properties here, what we want to do is over in the Razor page, we are just going to map these directly over, and we're going to use that using expressions. So for the get method of search text, it will be model.search text, and then for the set, it will be model.search text equals value. And I'm not sure why I chose parentheses, but let's go ahead and pull the parentheses off, which we did not need, and we'll close it out with our semicolon. So now that I have these split windows, it is a little tough to see, but okay. So let's pull it out. So now what we're doing is just passing through. So when .NET behind the scenes assigns our model search text here on the page, which is what it will do, in our set, we are just going to say, well, assign that to the search text of the model underneath. Now, we are also adding an expression for the get, but we actually don't expect that to really ever get used. I don't expect to use the search text in here, but typically this is how I would go ahead and do all my properties anyway. And then we'll do the exact same thing here for included det. We will include deleted. We will go ahead and make this an expression. We'll say that that's going to be include deleted, semi, and then for the set, we will do the exact same thing. Model dot include equals value. Okay, great. So now our parameters will pass through. We are going to we're going to just move this guy over to our class as well. You know, we're just going to moving all of this. So our on after render, we will for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to create a similar property over a similar function over in our model, and we'll call it. Now, for this simple example, that's what we're going to do, but actually I like to use sort of an MVVM framework. I do have one that I created, but there's also a lot of them out there that would take care of some of this for you, but we are going to do it all by hand with no helpers. So what we will do is we are just going to, and this won't be an override because you know, there's no base class here. But if you are using an MVVM package, then you might be deriving from a page that might have this or might have something similar. But for our purposes, we're simply going to move this code over. And of course, that means whenever this gets fired, we're going to call model.on after. Oh, we need to make this a public. And that will allow us to call model on. We will pass in the parameter that they give us, and we will return this. And since we are no longer using a wait inside of here, we will strip off our async here. So we will just return the task. Now, you might be thinking, well, you could just do this and then await it here. Absolutely, you can. There's some. I'm not going to get into it in this video. It would look like this, where you could just await it. I don't want to dive too far into this, but this actually creates another outer task that's sort of just a waste. You don't need to add an additional level of task here. You can just return the task that that this guy is creating. So there's no reason for us to add any extra overhead. So we will, even though that level of overhead is probably nearly immeasurable, still no reason to do it. So we are going to do that. We will paste our code that we took. Okay, great. So now we've at least moved all that out. We have our parameters. We have just this a pass through, and then we can simply we are going to move this entire function into our page. We're just going to copy that. I think I left off the last parens. There we go. Control X to copy that, paste it in here. Since it's on a different class now, we're going to need to expose this so that we can use it inside of our HTML. Okay. All right. We are making some progress. We'll get rid of some of this white space, and we will come down here and see what's not happy now. Okay. So what we had before, since all the code was in here, we had this model here, and we've moved it in here. So let's refactor this just a little bit. Model is what we are calling our internet list page. This is our page. So we're actually going to change this name from just being model to something that's a bit more representative. You can see here that what it is an internet model. So I'm just going to use Control RR for rename, and I'm just going to say that this is internet, and mouse out of the way, internet model, and currently it's a field. I went ahead and named it this way with the uppercase because I'm actually going to change this to a property now that it's no longer just used internal. You know, as soon as we are using this outside of this class, it should no longer be a field by best practices, so we are going to make it a property. So we'll just public and just add our get, and we'll probably do private set here. You shouldn't be changing it outside of this class, but however you want to do it, you could just make that a public set. It's It's not a huge deal. So now in our render, we will do the same code we were doing before. We'll go out, download the whole internet, and we'll assign it to our internet model. And that means over here in our page, we can change this to be our page model dot internet model. And do we have any other of those? No. Okay, so we still have a few other things to fix. So now when it comes to fixing these, we're gonna take things a step further. We've taken out all of our kind of high-level model stuff and put it into this page model. But now what we are talking about are these models that come from somewhere else. These are not really view models. These are more API or domain models. If we look at our code real quick, this internet service, entire internet service, has these models like internet model, and it just has a list of sites on it. And if we look at that, it has these properties: date created, net worth, URL, total size is active. But these are not built to be presented. These are not for the presentation. So these are not the models that you're looking for. I mean, these models are not the ones that we should be using here on this page, because they're not built to have all of our rules for displaying. So instead of just injecting this size formatter and continuing on with that code, we're gonna go ahead and talk about how we can fix up all of this that we're doing here, so that we don't have so much code inside of this Blazor page. And so we're going to start by creating a model that represents these items, and this model is going to be tightly coupled with our presentation. I'm going to go ahead and create it as a subclass down here. I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call it line item. Now I could call this website view model, whatever, but a lot of times when I'm creating these models that are tightly coupled to the presentation, their only purpose in life is to be bound to the UI and be formatted so that the UI doesn't have to do any C# code. I'll create something like a line item class. I'll nest it as a subclass inside of this page, just because I don't want to bounce all around the whole project, but I do want to separate the properties off of this guy, because I have a list of these line items. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay out the properties that my line item needs, that my presentation, my HTML here needs. So I'm going to start by just copying the properties over just as they are. So I'm going to go over here and I am going to just copy these, paste them in here. Let me look back here. I don't think, it doesn't look like I need is active. For display, I'm just going to show the total size in bytes, the URL, and the date created. Now the date created is going to be a short date string. So one of the things I like to do on these models sometimes is I have this strongly typed copy of it, but I'll just hit Control D to duplicate this line, and I'm going to create a second variant of this property, and I'm going to make it a type string. I'm going to say this is date site created display, and I'm going to use an expression to say that the display is always the date site created dot to short date string. Now, of course, when I build this line item, I could just format the date and put it into this string and be done with it. But I know that I'm not going to call this a million times, and so yes, each time I make a call to date site created display, it is going to compute it. But at the same time, that means that every time I change this, I don't have to remember to recompute this value. So there is a trade-off. To me, I find this quite readable and quite intuitive, and I don't forget to make changes to it. But if you are concerned about performance, because maybe you think that you're going to be querying this, you're going to be asking for this value tens of thousands of times, then maybe this isn't the right approach. But and for net worth, we are going to do something similar. So I'll just do Control D to duplicate. I will make this a string. I'm not sure why I ended up going with the old school decimal. I'm going to fix that right now, just because I can't handle seeing that. And I am going to make this an expression, and I'll just go ahead and steal the expression that I had over here. And of course, I'll probably not remember what I was going to put there. I'm just going to put net worth so that when I come back to fix my UI, I'll remember what I was supposed to be putting in there. Okay, so great. And net worth, so instead of item, because we're not iterating through our loop anymore, we will just say this, and oh, of course, this has to be display. Okay, so now we have two properties. We still have these two guys, and we have display properties that format them for us. URL is already a string, and total size in bytes is a little bit different because it's not just a simple, oh, this is what you get. We actually we look over an entire service that's responsible for formatting that. So with this one, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to change this to string, and then we will compute that and set it. Now the difference, if you're saying, well, why wouldn't you just do some kind of expression for this one too if you're doing it for these? Well, the reason is I have a dedicated service for formatting these, and I don't know how intensive that is. I know how intensive these are. I can see the code for them. I know exactly what's happening, and I know that they are light. But when this service is a black box, maybe it has to go look up user preferences or something crazy. So I do not want that one computing every time you read the property. So I guess the argument could be, well, this is inconsistent. Well, that's fine. Then just take these out and do them all manually when you build the line item. It's fine. Okay, so I have my line item. I am going to off of my model. I'm going to obviously need to expose these line items to the UI so that it can render. So up here, I'm going to create a collection or a list of my line items, and boom, like that. And what we will do is in our on pre-render, you know what? I also like to go ahead and say that it's initialized on create. Just one less thing I have to remember to do. So now, whenever we go and get our when we go get our internet model, we can just load up that, and we're just going to do a for each. So we will for each, and we'll say each site in our internet model dot sites. For every one of them, we will we will add to our line item collection. So we'll say this dot line items dot add new, boom, yes. We will use the properties here. So let's go ahead and fill these guys out. So date site created. Ooh, that was incorrect. Will be site dot date created. We'll just fill out the rest of these properties. We don't need to set the displays. They will be computed. So net worth, and what else do we have? Total size and URL. So this will be site dot total size. Oh no, so that one's going to be formatted. So we're just going to leave that one off for just a second, and we'll finish out the last one. URL. Boom. Okay. And last but not least, we just need to format our byte. So we come here, we have this service which does it for us. Copy, paste it over here, and we will pass in our site.total. Okay. Great. So now for each of the sites, we will loop through, we will build our line item. For most of the properties, we'll just assign them, but for total size, we'll go ahead and compute it and put it on the view model. Now, that's why you want a separate model here from your actual site model, because here you can add properties that make your UI less verbose. When we get to HTML, we don't have to write a bunch of code, and the reason we can do that is because we've decided we're not just going to use this for our presentation model. We create our own presentation model. Now we could use something like AutoMapper or any of those other libraries to to map properties over so that we don't have to do this manually. I mean, we could definitely get into that, but you know, I just want to show you from by hand. This is how you could or would do it. Now that we have our list over here, we can start fixing up some of this code we have in here. It looks like we forgot a few things. So here in our for each, our presentation was doing a little more than we would like. It was filtering down the sites to be only those that are active and those that have been created in the last 3 years. So we're no longer going to be doing that in here. We're going to strip this out, just cut that, and now we get to do that right here in our page instead of in our presentation. So we'll just paste that right there, and now what we will have is our line items will only have the items that our UI wants to see. So the other change we need to do here is this will be dot line items. And so since I'm doing this since I'm doing this live, not editing this video, and I didn't plan out what I was going to do here, you can already see that I can undo a refactoring that I did a moment ago, because now that we're going to bind this to our model.line items, we actually don't need this internet model available anymore, because nothing needs it. So I'm just going to kill it. We're just going to make it a local variable. So I'll just say var, and then I'm going to use my rename Control RR to say make this internet model a lowercase I to indicate that this is a local variable. And so yeah. So that was a waste of refactoring earlier. No big deal. Now we have our line items. We are in our presentation. We're looping through our line items. And now we don't need to do this type logic, because we created a property that is 100% built for display. And then this was our net worth. So item.networth display. And for our size in bytes, we don't need to do our formatter anymore, so we can just say at item.size in bytes, total size in bytes. Control C to just copy the whole line without selecting it, Control V to paste the whole line, and Control X to cut that line out. Okay, we are getting closer. And we need to hook up this delete website. It was originally a function in this page, but now it's off of our model, so this will become model.delete website. And it no longer, if you remember, that thing was taking in a different type of model, but now we have a line item. So we just need to come here and fix up our action to say that this is a line item instead of that. And then, so now all those guys are happy. Now the last thing, I think, since we've now made this a string, we can't do this check, but that's fine, because we actually this logic shouldn't be here in this presentation anyway. We want to move that. We want to move that over into our page. So there's a couple of ways we can handle this. First, let's start by just creating a property. So we use our prop bool, and we will say that this is, we'll say it is large site, because ultimately what we're looking to do is name this boolean something that represents this. Well, what is this check? This check is it a large site? So that's why we're going to name our property, is this a large site? And then here, I'm just going to cut this to my clipboard so I can paste it in a moment, but I'm going to say if item.isLargeSite, and of course then we need to set it. And here, when we're instantiating our line item, we will say isLargeSite equals the logic that we just had. So instead of item, this is now site. Now we have a boolean that's computed as to whether or not it's our large site, This lets our HTML be more explicit about what we are expecting. Instead of having some arbitrary number, 5,000 in there, we just say, if it's a large site, we're going to background danger. And if it's not, we're going to background light. And I actually don't like these if statements in here. There's a lot of ways we could get these out. The way that I like to do it, which may or may not be the most amazing solution, is sometimes I like to create a property here that, because the only difference is this CSS style, and so I'm actually going to, this is for the total size, so I'm going to create a new property. I'm going to call it the total size CSS, and I'm going to make it an expression, and I'm going to say that if this dot is large, then the CSS should be bg-danger, and if it is not, then the CSS will be bg-light. And then over here, I can just make this at item.css, whatever, total size CSS, and then I can just Control X to delete all of these guys, boom, 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 and Control KD to format, and now we get that out. Now, this is, I have mixed feelings about this, about putting CSS classes in my page model. This model is built for this page, so the argument can absolutely be made that this is fine, but I don't really like having CSSs in here very often, but sometimes to get a clean UI like this, I'll do it. You could make the argument, well, you could just give it a name, like dot is large, and dot not is large, and then add a CSS class, but then you don't get to use the BG, the bootstrap danger and light, so you can do what you want there. Maybe this is taking it a little bit too far, or maybe you like it and you're going to use it, and then when someone complains, then you'll just blame me, which is fine. So with that, I think that might be all the changes that we're going to make to this page. A couple of things to note, not related to these changes specifically, but there is still a little bit of code. You could do some things to get rid of some of this by deriving a base class, and actually I might cover some more of this in another video where you could actually get this thing out completely. You're going to need the parameters, so there's not too much you can do about that, but you could do some additional work to get this out. But I still think that from where we were, which was this guy, where we really had a strong blending of C# and HTML to this guy with much less C#, and some people actually like to put the code at the bottom, which is perfectly fine. I think that this, well, not I think, for me, this is a way more readable and understandable way to break this up, because this is a very simple version of a page. You can imagine when you have 5 repositories and 6 different services and all this stuff going on, how nasty this code could get, and being able to do it all here, and maybe abstract this out into some different components and such, but just being able to get it all out here will be nice. Now, of course, by injecting this page means you're going to have to register it. So dependency injection, it's not just going to magically be available. So you might be thinking, well, dang, I'm gonna have to go and define every page in my startup. Every time I add a new page, I have to go and register it. And yes or no. If you're kind of a purist, then absolutely you have to go and register each page manually, one by one. However, if you're interested in using kind of a helper, I'm gonna close out some of this. I'm gonna close all. Save everything, and I'm gonna go to my program, which is where my services are registered, and there's a NuGet package called Scrutor, And it's pretty amazing for registering dependencies. For doing your inversion of control container. For getting it set up. And you can see what it does here is it does scan. It says what assembly. So we're going to scan the assembly that our program is in. And we are going to add classes. So we are going to say that everything from our services namespace should be implemented as a scoped service to whatever its interface is. So if we look at, for example, the entire internet service, which is in that namespace we just pointed at, it implements entire internet service. And so that means it'll automatically register. And when you create new services and new implementations, they will just automatically be registered. So the great thing about that is you can do the same thing with your pages. So that did my services, and then here I'm saying, okay, so for all the classes that are in the same namespace as my internet list, I just wanted to show how you can do in namespace and hard code it, or you could have it read the namespace from a class, whatever you want. And what we are saying is that everything that's in that namespace that's class name ends with the word page, because if you remember what we named our pages, our convention, in this project is it's the page, the page name with the word page appended to the end of it. If you did page model, whatever, whatever your convention is, do that here, and we're just registering as itself. We're not creating interfaces for all of our pages, so there's no need for as implemented interface. You're just going to register it as self transients. Now, of course, if you have a lot of services that need to switch between singleton, transient, and scoped, this may not be the best, because then you're going to get some really nasty logic here for when something is registered as transient or scoped or singleton. There is another pattern where you decorate those services with a particular attribute, and you can use Scrutor to use that attribute to register their scope. So you might have a scoped attribute, and that would register all in the scope to singleton. So there's a lot of patterns that you could use to still use Scrutor if you have a bunch of complex service registration. But yeah, I think that's probably enough on Scrutor. Probably could have done a whole video. And so that's all I have for this video today. The point being, don't write so much code in your HTML. Try to get it down to as little C# as you can, and put all the heavy lifting, all the real work, all the nastiness in a separate class, and then just use that in your HTML, and it will make your life so much easier as you're trying to go through and do your layout without so much C# code kind of cluttering things up. Thank you for hanging with me through the end of this video. I hope you have a wonderful day.